Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Dinks with Kinks. I'm one of your hosts, John Dondero, and with me, as always, someone who wasn't here the first time, but we couldn't do this without, Miss Rebecca.
Hello, everyone.
And a man who might be toit, but will never leave you hanging out to dry, Mr. Shep.
Good evening.
Before we get into tonight's episode, I do want to remind everybody that we are, in fact, on that social media. Go out, follow us at Dinks with Kinks on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Reach out to us. Tell us what you're thinking. Recommend new kinks. Tell us how we've done on the kink we talked about. Yeah. Hey, guys, how y'all doing?
It
Talk
depends
to
on
us.
what they're
Touch
thinking. Yeah, talk to us. But, if you want to tell us what you're thinking,
Tell us what you're thinking.
Just get consent first, depending on what it is.
Hey, listen, everybody who has reached out to us has been amazing. I know
they
overly.
are. That's why I was just joking.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm thinking dirty thoughts all the time.
Well, that's, you think when you do a kink podcast and you have a beautiful lady on there, like Miss Rebecca, you're going to get a ton of just like skis and thing. No, our community, our listeners, you guys have been amazing. Everyone who's reached out has just been positive, and very open to talk. I think we've only had like one skis ball. And they were just
I'm
like,
not
can
pretty
I...
enough for the skis?
No, it means you were so amazing that they just nah, we got to be respectful.
Oh, well, that's nice. Thank you, community. I love our listeners. I love our community. It's great.
But also send us your dick pics at Dinks with Kinks on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Or boob pics. I'm not opposed to either.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know
You'll
I kind of
enjoy
started this
them
episode
while I stroke my putty.
a little backwards. No one can see you stroking your cat, Shep. This is audio podcast.
I know, it's all for me. It's all for me.
Okay.
He likes to stroke his pussy even though nobody knows.
I know. He does that. Well, listen, I could fill this thing with puns, but I'm sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied. But we are absolutely doing...
You can go that long. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. We were here 3 minutes. So it's good.
No, we're here for it.
All right.
No, we're actually doing part 2 of something. Something so important. It was our very first episode.
Very first.
We're talking about Bondage tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Bondage part 2. Because we made a vow to kind of just revisit some of the kinks we've talked about and some of the bigger kinks that we could talk more about. And this is both. This is a kink that you weren't around for. This is before you joined our lovely affair. And two, this is a massive kink. So much goes into it. I actually had to go back and listen to episode 1 just so we didn't talk about what we talked about the last time.
But wasn't the last time, wasn't the first episode, it was a live stream that we made an audio podcast, or that you guys made an audio podcast, and now this is a strictly audio podcast and our live stream is separate. So yeah, I think it's a different type of format. So even if we repeated something, it wouldn't, and I'm here, so it's a different opinion. So even if we repeated something, it wouldn't be the same.
That's true. Well, I just didn't want to do it word for word. I didn't want to go back and someone you just copy and paste it. I'm like, no, I didn't.
We can't.
I just forgot what I said the first time.
So that's not fair.
I mean, we're in a
well,
society
that's why.
Of how many remakes of movies are there out there? So I think we're okay.
That's true.
Okay.
But that's why I really strapped down and buckled hard and listened to our first episode, so I knew where we were at. But Bondage.
He was just setting up the pun. He was just setting up the bondage pun. Okay, got it. Fair. Okay, cool.
I mean, just so we know we're on the same page. Bondage. Everybody knows Bondage. I think that's probably one of the most well-known and mostly accepted kink of all time.
Yeah,
am I right?
Knows Bondo. It's what you use to fix car dents, right? Bondo.
Oh, shit.
I think Bondage is on, isn't Bondage one of the, this could be perception. Now, this is all perception, but Bondage seems to be the first, the intro kink. a lot of people like, here, let me try and let me tie you, like get the necktie and tie you up, or get the fun little handcuffs. It's like, this is like, bondage is like, I feel like is the first intro kink that everybody sort of steps into.
And honestly, that's why we made it the very first episode. And if you're listening and you get curious, I'm going to promise you it's not the good quality that you get nowadays. It is back when we were, in fact, a live stream and still learning how to podcast. And we started with bondage because it is absolutely most people's introduction to the harder levels of kink. Because, I mean, there's spanking. Everybody gets a little spanky play, a little bit of choking here and there.
That's why I was like, I think bondage would be the first step into the more advanced, whereas everybody's intro is a good impact or spanking or something of that nature. Maybe, but
I mean, absolutely. Like, when you have any type of kink, you want something that's like mainstream. Like this is one of those kinks where it's super mainstream. Everybody knows what it is, so it's kind of easy to start into. You don't really have to be that freaky for it. And, you can be, and we didn't really cover this in the very first episode, but bondage goes so much farther than just like your average, like, oh, I'm going to get some rope, I'm going to tie you up, he. But we have talked, and we didn't really talk about all the kinds, like shibari, suspension, and we talked a little bit on the suspension episode about like suspension bondage and whatnot. And when we did the saran wrap episode, we talked about encasement bondage. But bondage is very much a almost conglomerate kink because it's a category, not a kink.
That is very true. Bondage is a category, and it's just the umbrella. It's the umbrella. It's the major genre of it.
It's the Umbrella Corporation of all things restraint.
It is the Umbrella Corporation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think we covered that the first time. I mean, we talked about, like, there was multiple versions of bondage, but not that, like, kink and a category. That's the one thing that's really awesome about this. Like, if you're into bondage, typically you enjoy all the subsets. But it is, in fact, a category instead of a kink. And that fascinates me.
When some people go, hey, I'm into bondage, and like somebody who is like very like well versed in the lifestyle and well versed in kink and fetishes, they're like, okay, what kind? Like, that's the next question. I feel like it when she's like, I'm into bondage. Okay, well, what kind? Like, are you into, handcuffs? Are you into shibari, rope bondage and rigging? Are you into cuffs? Are you into spreader bars? That's a type of bondage. Like all these things. It's and you're right. It's a fun thing to. It's like, what's your favorite color? And then getting into all the different different.
How many forms of bondage do you think we could name as a podcast, a kink podcast? So, all right, I'm gonna keep count. Okay, you ready? So we got shibari.
Yes.
Encasement bondage, like latex saran wrap.
Does rope play count as a second? Because shibari is different than rope play.
Yep, rope play. Soft bondage.
As
cathartic
in
bondage.
Soft bondage.
Like scarves and whatnot.
Yes. I'm just trying to clarify for our audience.
Oh, yeah. Scarves, stuff like that. We have situational bondage.
Yes.
Like, that would be like quicksand's a situational bondage.
Gotcha.
Stuck is a situational bondage.
Cuffs?
Shep, you got any?
What is leather cuffs and handcuffs and all that? Gotta go under.
Imprisonment? Would that be? No.
Because we've got.
But imprisonment is one.
Yeah, imprisonment. Caging. So we've talked about that in the chastity episode. Let's see what else we got. I've got 8 so far, and I know we haven't even scratched the surface.
I
You
know,
know,
I'm
we
sort of
talk
ashamed
about-
of our stuff that we haven't even gotten double
Scratch harder,
digits.
Daddy. Scratch harder.
Oh, you didn't name one. Don't give me that. I'll fight you. Because I am into bondage. Like, I thoroughly enjoy bondage. I actually started my fetish career as a bondage photographer. They wanted me to be a rigger, but I cannot tie a knot. I can't knot. I cannot knot. But especially like because most bondage photography is very shibari-esque, and I know we've talked about shibari. Let's go into a little more detail what shibari is, because we keep throwing that word around, but we really haven't talked about what shibari is. And it is more or less rope artwork on the human body. Like, it is a very artistic style type bondage.
I did a very simple form of shibari last week on our Halloween live stream. I did a rope harnesses and that type of, and shibari is so beautiful, and it's so fun. It's fun to do, and it's fun to be done too.
Oh, absolutely. And if you want to watch that live stream, it is every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/thedondero. The link is below in the description. You can come check us out. But yeah, typically when you see photos, if you Google bondage and look at bondage porn, 9 times out of 10, it is usually some form of shibari, which is what most people consider bondage. But it's this whole subcategory.
Yeah, or suspension, or humiliation bondage.
Oh, humiliation bondage. That's a whole different thing.
Or head bondage, because you got the ball gags and such.
Corsets are a type of bondage.
They are. Corseting. Yeah.
Corset?
Bondage really... Corseting. Corsaging. No, not corsaging.
Corsaging. It's different.
That's a whole different thing, yeah. That's like we're going to prom. I got your corsage. But you should wear a corset to prom. Just saying. But only put out if you're ready to make that step.
Oh, when we got one of our previous episodes, sensory deprivation bondage.
Yeah, sensory deprivation. In fact, I think if you listen to at least 75% of our episodes, at some point in time, that kink probably could tie back into bondage.
All right.
Oh, absolutely.
Bondage is absolutely that gateway kink, or no, I wouldn't say it's a gateway kink. It is a kink that partners well with everything. Like, it's that one wine that goes both with red meat, fish, dessert. It's just good wine. Really good wine. You don't care. You don't care what you're eating with it. You're just like, yeah, but that wine is super fancy. I don't care if I'm eating ice cream. Give me that wine.
I think it's the versatile kink. Bondage is the versatile kink. It's the Swiss Army knife kink. It does everything. It goes like softcore, hardcore. Like, it is the essentials kit. It's in the essential kink kit. Like, and that's what I feel like bondage is. It's like, it's in the essentials kink kit. Here's your lube, and here's your bondage, and go.
Essentials kink kit, available on Amazon and other fine stores.
Oh my gosh,
That
we
sounds
need
like
to
the
do that. An
perfect commercial
essentials kink kit. I know, right?
But I try to look up the history of bondage, and it has been around for so long and has been just okay, pretty acceptable forms of play, that there's not really a history of it. It's like trying to find the history of when people started drinking water. We've always done it. Yeah. So there's no real talk of it. Right. Yeah.
It's also one of those big ironies where such things were, you would see originating as imprisonment or torture.
Mm-hmm.
But then someone that got imprisoned or tortured said, "Ooh, I kind of like this."
So, do you want to hear the 6 types of bondage listed on Wikipedia? Just
only
go ahead
6?
And list theirs.
Okay.
There's only 6.
Well,
Bondage for a purpose.
We had 8.
We had 8. We had more.
Yeah.
Bondage for a purpose. It's best known as BDSM. It is like I'm tying you up to do something to you.
Handcuffs, cuffing, tying, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
And then there's decorative bondage, which is shibari, any type of artwork, aesthetically pleasing to the eye. Torture bondage, which is much more into the like lines of degradation. Tickle torture is very popular because we'll tie you up and we're going to tickle torture you. Maybe do a little water drip. And I mean water drip. I don't mean waterboarding. I mean the little drip on you. People do that. They'll do it on their genitals. I looked that up while doing the research, and it's the little thing where it's just a drop of water steadily dropping. And typically when you used to see it back in the day,
Drip.
no, it has to be like they have devices where it's timed.
Oh wow!
It is a pattern, and when you
I'm a pattern
look
dropper.
that up, typically it's on the forehead because that's the part where like it's supposed to drive you like insane to do that. But their form is on the genitals. Also,
TikTok
really fun.
on the cock. What?
Yeah, TikTok on the cock.
Mm-hmm.
Or vagine. But also that's you
TikTok
can
on
consider
taco.
even lighter torture like wax play. Next we have film bondage, and that is like that's almost a form of shibari, but that's like the bondage. It's usually fake to look more realistic, and I know that sounds very counterproductive. Fake to look more realistic, but it's something that the partner's not really in bondage. It just looks like they are in bondage.
Yeah, that's where you use
it's
like
completely
the
non-violent.
big, thick, glittery type ropes, so they really stand out for the pictures and/or film, but not really great for the actual bondage.
And this is actually the next category is actually where shibari is placed, but I'm going to kind of disagree with that. But meditative bondage, and because we've talked about, I think we talked about this in episode 1, but bondage is not always a sexual construct. A lot of people, and if you're listening at home and you haven't listened to episode 1, I do believe I mentioned weighted blankets. People use weighted blankets because that compression, that almost entrapment. Yes, Shep?
I do. No, I was just raising my finger. I'm one of those.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I cannot stand weighted blankets. It's too heavy. I want a thin sheet. But people, typically, if you enjoy a weighted blanket and you like that security, try a light form of bondage as something to soothe yourself. It's almost like very much, what is it? Coddling? Swaddling.
And actually, that's what corseting is. Actually, for me, is a type of bondage. It's very sexy. I love the feel of it, but it's a security thing. I feel like you tie me up, and I also feel like shibari can be meditative for those who are doing the tying. It's a lot of concentration and repetitive things, and it's a very beautiful thing. But there are also several shibari chest harnesses that are dense that actually apply the same compression, and it is very meditative in that aspect, and in that like a weighted blanket. So but corseting is in that meditative state. It's very much like a swaddle. It's a very sexy stiff swaddle.
Oh, absolutely. And so I highly recommend if you're into weighted blankets, you don't have to be a kinky person, but go to Walmart, get you some nylon rope, and tie your legs up. I had a partner. She was not into bondage sexually, but she actually really enjoyed it. Like I used to tie her up, and like mainly her legs, so her body was free, and she was like, I just want to sit, and I want to read, and I want to relax, and it was very soothing to her, and she very much enjoyed it, but there was no sexual gratification to it. It was amazing. It was like, she's like, no, I'm not aroused at all, but I am very relaxed. And the bondage we were looking for with handcuffs and chains, it's called metal bondage. We're such idiots.
Oh,
it's literally
shit.
simply called metal bondage.
No matter wherever you look, they're gonna have a different amount of types and names and categorizations of them. Unfortunately, it's not universal. But we'll say
it's not universal.
One fun fact, though, because she mentioned some of the ones that are bondage that are made for around the breast and chest for compression and stuff like that. That's another substyle of shibari called shinju. Shinju, or breast bondage. It's a fun fact for everyone.
You mean like tit bondage? Because that's what I call it.
Yes.
And there's an example. There's an
let's not kid
example of
ourselves.
how one thing can have different names.
And on two different levels.
Yeah, very.
Means the exact same thing, just on two very different levels. And like I said, bondage, it comes in all sorts. There's no one particular way to be bound, but bondage does encompass all of that. Support for Dinks with Kinks is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's Performance Package is the ultimate in men's hygiene bundle. Join over 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with an exclusive offer just for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code DWK20 at manscaped.com. If my math is correct, that's like 12 million balls. So let me get personal with you guys. I'm going to be honest, I have used some pretty sketchy means to get rid of the hair down there. I have done everything from wax, those rusted scissors that you always find in your bathroom. I don't even know how they get there. And that cream that burns the hair off and turns you into just a giant chemical burn for like a week. Then I found Manscaped. Their Performance Package 4.0 has arrived, and oh man, is it a game changer. Inside the package, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all those goodies. And they all fit perfectly in there. Oh my god. First off, that Lawnmower 4.0, that trimmer is of the future. It's probably one of the best ball trimmers I've ever used down there, and I have used every manner of hair trimmer down there, including the one I use on my face, which is kind of gross when you think about it. Their 4th generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproof and also has a 4,000 LED spotlight for when you need a precise save. And trust me, fellas, you don't think you need a flashlight till you get down there and you're like, oh, it's lit up. I'm loving this. Because this trimmer is waterproof, you can say goodbye to the mess of the bathroom floor. Just pop that sucker in the shower and just bzz, 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 bzz. You thought that was good? But I want to take your grooming game even further to the next level. The Performance Package 4.0 also includes the Weed Whacker nose and hair trimmer. The Weed Whacker is a waterproof, provides their proprietary skin-safe technology which helps reduce nicks, snags, and tugs of those delicate nose hairs. And trust me, getting to my age, you get some nose hairs in there, and you try to hide them in your beard, you can't. You can't do it. There's no mustache concealment. You just got to get in there and take care of them. You just stick that sucker in and go to town. Their Crop Preserver, ball deodorant, and Crop Reviver ball toner will change the way you approach your hygiene routine. Trust me when I say this, fellas, your balls will thank you. I used that stuff, and oh my god, did it smell amazing. And it actually really helped with like day-to-day chafing. I didn't realize chafing was a thing. Like, I was one of those people who's like, oh, I'm never chafing, until I tried this stuff, and I was like, okay, apparently I have just been uncomfortable for 40 years. Cool. Glad to know. Manscaped is not only going to give you all of that, but they're going to throw 2 free gifts in their Performance Package 4.0. The Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. Bring your comfort and boxers to another level. Those boxers are incredibly comfortable. They snug everything, and it makes it actually look pretty good. So, you want to wear them around, just look yourself in the mirror and be like, oh yeah. Anyway, it's time to take care of yourself. Go to manscaped.com and get 20% off and free shipping with the code DWK20. I'm telling you guys, Get 20% off and free shipping with the code DWK20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com, DWK20. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tool for the right tool at manscaped.com. Now, back to our show. Now we really need, we're about like the halfway mark of our episode, and so I'm going to take this sweet nugget time. Sweet nugget. And I want to talk about some safety. How, like, the dangers of bondage. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about the dangers of bondage and then talk about safety.
Take us to the danger zone.
Danger zone? Thank you, Shep. I was heading there too. something danger zone. But let's be real. Bondage, as cheeky and as innocent as it can be, or as kinky and wild as it can be, there are some risks behind bondage. Number one, right now, circulation. Cutting off the circulation through tight bondage. Or not even tight bondage, but bondage in the inappropriate place. Tying, so where you're blocking certain veins. It could cause limb damage, necrosis, heart attack, clotting. Oh, there's so many things that can happen if you're not properly bound. Or if it's too tight.
One good example is, a lot of people have basic cuffs that, yes, can be used for holding people down or tying you up to a cross. But if you want to suspend somebody, you have to make sure that they're actual suspension cuffs. So it does not, as soon as you start pulling the person up, it does not instantly start cutting off the pressure to their wrists.
Well, absolutely. And I think probably the greatest example of this is actual medical procedure called a tourniquet. A tourniquet is meant to cut off the flow of blood to an extremity. It's used in severe gashes, poisoning, like snake bites, and things like that. It keeps the circulation. And so the one thing you definitely want to avoid is don't accidentally tourniquet yourself, because you may not feel it immediately, because the first thing that happens is you go numb. And if you're lost in your scene and you're practicing and you're playing, you may not realize, oh, I can't feel my arm. Or you might not be able to see your arm, and the next thing you know, you have skin damage, nerve damage, all sorts of damage.
That is very, for somebody who's into rope play and shibari, and that is actually one of the biggest things that we try to warn people about when they are tying, especially because the beginner ones are cuffs and how to tie your hands together. And a lot of times they tie them inappropriately and they cut off the circulation in the wrists. And especially if you're new, you don't know how much pressure, and so that's why, like in shibari and or any type of hand tying, like sometimes I've actually had been bound up inappropriately by a necktie because he tied it too tight, and it was I was going numb, and I was like we got to get out, I can't, and he had tied the knife not too tight, and so it totally pulls you out of the scene. So I just, especially with anybody who's like new into especially the tying part of it, take your time in the beginning. It is better to take your time in the beginning than to get rudely interrupted later.
And always wear safety gloves when you're tying your knife. You don't want to get cut.
Tying your knife, yes. The next very common risk is asphyxiation. And this typically happens with any type of rib cage bondage or neck bondage. Like hog ties are very popular.
Even corsets. Too tight.
And corsets. Any type of compression bondage. You very much run the risk of asphyxiation. And it's very popular with breath play. And we talked about that. Was also an episode where we covered breath play. So you want to make sure that you're getting air. You may be able to breathe, but you might not be getting the oxygen you need. So you want to be very aware of that, because especially if you're doing self-bondage or corseting, you may not realize, oh, I can't get air, and then you're not able to get yourself out because you are losing consciousness, or you won't be able to alert your partner if you're in a scene and you are a very quiet, still partner, they might not necessarily know, oh, I can't breathe. So you want to be very cautious and mindful of your ability to breathe and that you're getting oxygen.
Also collars. Be careful of how tight you are. Like when you're in play, not the collars that you wear every day when you are committed to somebody in the DS relationship, but those play collars with you just be careful with how tight you pull them. Yeah, it's fun, but you have major arteries going through your neck and your blood and obviously your esophagus, so you don't know necessarily how tight it is until something bad happens. So be very careful with the collars as well. And
next is probably my favorite pitfall of bondage, one that has led to many comical stories, but you can't get yourself out. I can't untie this knot. I'm stuck here. I have tied myself to the bed. I can't get myself unstuck. Now the fire department's going to have to come rescue me. Or worse, I mean, like I said, that can absolutely take a dark turn if no one knows what you're doing, or, your partner, you're doing self-bondage, which is very popular. Yeah, you could get tied to the bed. I think one of my favorite stories is about a man and a woman who were going to try bondage for the first time. They were elderly, and so he ties her to the bed real tight and then has a heart attack. She is currently tied to the bed. She can't do anything about the fact that he just had a heart attack. He is unconscious because he had a heart attack, and they found them 2 days later. She was massively dehydrated and he had passed away. And I know that's a very dark story, but we do want to stress the fact that make sure you have a backup plan, some way to free yourself in that situation. Mm-hmm. Or again, the fire department's going to show up, and hopefully it's only an hour or two after you tied up, not 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. How many times... Not now, not currently, because we're a little bit more older and wiser. But when we first started kinking out, like, how many times have you gotten like, fuck? Like, you've gotten sort of yourself in a predicament and you're like, God damn it.
I have a very fun story, which is with some situational bondage, some mud play. We were out and a partner, and we were out and we were going to she wanted to give fellatio while she was stuck like knee deep in mud, and there happened to be a construction area across from us, and it was quiet, it was night, and we're like, okay, let's go do this, let's go be kinky and all of that. And so she stepped in the mud, she sank about to her knees. We couldn't get her out. I had to walk back to the house, get a shovel, and come back and dig her out. And she was stuck. She was just like, all right, it is now cold, I am tired, I have jizz in my hair, I want to go home. So, yes.
Screw you guys. I want to go home.
Screw you guys. I'm stuck in the ground.
She's dirty on the top and the bottom.
Yep.
Well.
But it was like I said, it had a happy ending. I was able to dig her out.
I'm sure it did, because how else did it get stuck in her hair?
I know, right?
They did have a very happy ending. But we had a good laugh about it. So that was a happy instance where, you got stuck and you're like, okay, good deal. What about y'all? Have y'all ever been stuck?
Stuck.
Or, just couldn't get the knot untied. Like,
yeah, well,
you have that double knot and you're like, shit.
Yeah, I had the next high incident where he had tied me and I was losing feeling, and he had tied it and he had tied the knot too tight. And I was like, early 20s, like just experimenting, but because I thought the necktie thing was hot, and I was like, oh yeah. And here on top of that, he also had me blindfolded, so I was blindfolded with these ties, and I was like, I can't feel my hands, and he's like, I can't get the knot undone. Like, we spent like 5 minutes. Finally, he's like, I could find a knife or scissors or something. I was like, get me out of here. So yeah, it was good times. And I was
What about-
blindfolded. I was like, he forgot to take the blindfold off, so I'm like here in the dark.
What about you, Shep? You ever had somebody tied up and you're like, "Oh, I can't get my nail in there. Hold on."
I would say no. Simply because of the fact I've never been, never had any confidence in myself with ropes and such. So my bondage has always been with straps and everything else. So things that are easier to unclip or unfasten. Luckily.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean that's probably the smart way of doing it. Is always make sure there is a way to get out. Don't swallow the key, as it were. Always keep a pair of scissors handy.
It's okay to swallow, just not the key.
Yeah, don't swallow the key. Don't super glue your hand down. But let's talk about some like bondage materials, because we covered the different forms of bondage, but now we got like the different things you can use for bondage. A very popular one, and I want to talk about some safety behind this one, is of course rope.
The various materials for bondage and where you can find them good prices at Lowe's and Home Depot.
Yeah. Actually, the best rope I've ever found for bondage has been at Wally World, the Walmart.
Really?
A store like, oh god, yeah. Just cheap nylon rope. It's the same. If you buy the fancy bondage rope, guess what it is? It's cheap nylon rope.
I'm aware. I guess I'm a rope snob.
Well, it's not shibari rope, but that clothesline rope is a good trainer and a good go-to.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
for basics.
You can absolutely get a high quality rope, and it's very soft. It's very pliable. It has some give and stretch to it. And what we used to do is we'd go buy a bundle of it, because you can get like 400 feet for like $10, and cut it in our shibari lengths for our like sage bondage. And you cut it, and we would melt the tip and then wrap it in electrical tape. So you'd always be able to easily find the two tips. And there you go. You have an entire bondage kit.
Because you're always looking for the two
for
tips.
$10. The two tips.
But there are different kinds of rope. There's nylon rope, and there's also cotton rope, like that soft rope that some people. But be careful with that one, because it, if you use it over and over, and it can get dirty with bacteria. So make sure that after you're using the bondage, especially with bodily fluids and skin, and depending on what you're doing with it, make sure you wash your rope. That's a big thing that a lot of people don't talk about. Wash your rope. Make sure it gets washed. Make sure it gets sanitized, because things get dirty and you don't want to use that over and over, especially if you're like doing fancy harnesses or, body suits, and it can get gross and you could get an infection.
Absolutely. The next thing we want to talk about is type of rope. You want to be careful. Now I said you can get the cheap nylon rope, but don't get any rope, because rope burn is a thing. And I don't know if you've never experienced rope burn, I'm going to tell you right now, it hurts. It's not fun, and it can lead to serious injuries and infection. So definitely stick to cotton, nylon, the softer forms of rope. And you can tell, we've all seen those cheap lassos where you're like, oh, I've got a rope, and it's made of twine, and it looks really cool, but it is very uncomfortable to hold, and I would not want to be tied up with it. That, next being said, rope is a great form of bondage, but you want to make sure you're not tying it directly to a person. With most forms of rope, you want to tie it to itself. That way, you don't pull it tighter and cut off circulation at certain points, like the wrist. When we do, and we're not going to get into the very details of rope work and shibari, because we want you to go out and research it yourself. But when we used to tie a wrist, we would tie around the wrist, wrap around the wrist, and then tie into the center, so the rope is actually tightened onto itself instead of onto the skin. So that way you don't have pinching and pulled nerves and whatnot, because when you tighten a rope, it pulls in and can suck your skin in there, and that really hurts.
Yeah, definitely.
The next most popular form of bondage Tape. Who doesn't love a good kidnapping? Get a good roll of duct tape, take them out there, and just wrap them up with it.
Is there nothing you can't do with duct tape?
There is. Don't tie people up with duct tape. Duct tape on bare skin can lead to serious injury and uncomfortness. There are special tapes. They make bondage tape that sticks to itself, but not to the person.
Yeah, or kinesiology tape, I think, is another type that's okay.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret, because those out there who are like, but I want to use duct tape. It seems naughty. And, like, it's very crude and very, like, prime. Like, if you're trying, especially if you're doing CNC, you know, the kidnap fantasies and whatnot. Oh, yeah, duct tape is great. The best way to call it, you know, to not have injury to it is a little thing we like to call Vaseline. Apply Vaseline to the area before you put the tape down. So again, it pretty much creates that bondage tape. The tape will not stick to you, but it will stick to itself. And it's a little easier to get out of. Trust me, as somebody who's been waxed more than he would like to admit, brought to you by Manscaped, no longer have to be waxed. That's our sponsor, if you can't tell.
Thank you, Manscaped. We're saving me.
Thank you, Manscaped, for saving me from the waxing. But it's not fun. It's not a very fun process of getting out of bondage, or you're having your hair ripped out, or, you know, skin irritation, because glue is an irritant. It will irritate your skin. Have you guys ever been duct taped?
Nope.
No, not even a little bit. A little bit of duct tape. I've used duct tape many times in the bondage world. Yeah, a lot of Vaseline. So, the next most popular form of bondage is everyday items, i.e., neckties. Pantyhose are very popular for bondage because they're stretch and they give. So do neckties. Neckties don't give as much, but they're silky and soft. They're usually like really fun forms of bondage.
I have actually used. I took a first aid medical class, and we did a class on splinting. And we had these long linen muslin strips for splinting, and I totally, took some. I was like,
there you go.
You little vixen.
Yeah, no, I actually, as someone with a pantyhose fetish, I love using pantyhose as bondage. And the reason I do is because it stretches, but it doesn't loosen. Like, the one thing I love about bondage is, kind of the torture, the squirming and the whatnot. And that is a great material because the nylon will stretch, but when it's curled up, it won't break it. You can't break through it. And you can only stretch enough not to get out of it because it's still tight. Another very fun form of bondage is, of course, handcuffs, spreader bars, and bondage gear, as it were. Metal bondage, as we found out from our Wikipedia page.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been handcuffed before?
Hey, honestly, I have never been handcuffed with metal cuffs. I've used leather cuffs, different material, but never metal handcuffs.
I have, but not for sexual reasons. But we're not getting. This is not a criminal pod. This is not a true crime podcast, so we're not going to get into that.
There was some true crime going on there. Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's just say. Well, I wouldn't say crime. I mean, shenanigans, drunken shenanigans, publicness.
Were you nude?
No, I wasn't nude. So I have a fun story about
fanny
handcuffs
pack involved?
and the fire department. Do y'all want to hear my fire department handcuff story?
I mean, we're here. So.
Okay, let's do this. So I had a pair. I used to work in a type of law enforcement for a long while, and so I had plenty of actual metal handcuffs, but they weren't the kind you think about with the chain. They were hinge cuffs. They're more popular because you can't twist as much. And I'm sitting on my front porch, and I'm actually reading my mail. But I found my cuffs in my car. I went out to grab my spare pair to bring in, and I'm sitting there tapping them on my ankle bones, just out of boredom. And all of a sudden I hear click, and I look down, and I have now locked my handcuffs, both of them, both sets, because they were folded in, to my ankle, with the keyholes facing each other.
Oh no.
No.
Oh no.
So now I can no longer open them with my key that I have. I have plenty of handcuff keys. In fact, I still carry a handcuff key with me to this day. And I had to go to the fire department because I had nothing to cut it with. Because these were high-grade metal handcuffs. They were not meant to be broken. They were the real deal. So luckily the fire department was right down the street from my house, and I knew them. And I walked in and said, "Hey boys, you want a little entertainment today?" And I popped up my leg and my flip-flop, my very girly cherry flip-flops. And I said, "I can't get these off." And they had to get the jaws of life and cut them off of me. So
They popped your cherry?
they popped my cherry. So I not only have I had handcuffs on me, but I've also had to use the jaws of life to get out of a bondage situation. Beat that, internet.
Oh, now they're going to. Now they're going to. Now we're going to get floods.
I know. Here we do not condone doing anything stupid, but if you've already done said stupid thing, reach out to us on Dinks with Kinks.
I know. I sort of want to know.
If it shows up on ridiculousness, we don't recommend it.
I don't want you to do something to top me, but if you've already done said stupid thing, please, please, please reach out to us with your very embarrassing bondage stories. I want to know them.
Unless he's
I want to know I'm not
those
alone.
Bottom modes, then he might want to be topped.
But the safety, thing with any type of metal contraption, cuffs, or anything like that is, one, don't handcuff yourself somewhere that you can't get yourself out of. I.e., if you're solo bondaging, don't use handcuffs. Because that's the moment you went, "Oh, I left the key on the bedstand." There has been many stories of people handcuffing themselves to their beds for self-bondage pleasures, which is a very popular thing, and then realizing, "Oh, I have no way of getting the key."
Yes, do the safety pre-check all times.
Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, those are like the top. I would say the top 4, 5. How many did we name? Do you remember? I think we said 4.
We
Top.
yeah.
How many materials? But like top 4, I forgot how to math. I was thinking about just handcuffed my foot.
He was off in his happy place.
I was off in my happy place. Types of popular bondage material, and like I said, we can encourage people to do bondage. Bondage is fun. It's cathartic. It's relaxing. It's great to do. It's something you can do by yourself and with a partner and with multiple partners.
This is definitely one of those where it's safety first.
Safety first, because like with any good kink, there is danger and there is things to worry about. That being said, episode number 1, episode 106, I guess we're on 106, 105.
Somewhere around
math. I still love bondage. It's still probably one of my favorite kinks to talk about, to play with. What about y'all? What's your final thoughts on bondage?
I love bondage. I love bondage. I love most forms of bondage in one way, shape, or form. And I love watching it. I love tying somebody up. I love binding someone, and I also love being bound. So it's one of those. This is one of the few kinks that I like doing both, like equally. Whereas I'm not just getting tied up, but I actually enjoy being, tying somebody up or putting somebody in cuffs. I think this is one of those ones where I can go both ways. I can switch.
What about you, Shep?
Have done. We'll do again. With happy face. Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say, I'm a big fan. I'm gonna keep doing this. That said, if you're into bondage, please tell us what we missed on this episode. Reach out. Again, I'm going to keep telling people to reach out to us because I have enjoyed every conversation I've had. I've had at least 400 conversations about the smoking fetish. It has been great, and I have yet to turn somebody down and be like, tell me about it, because it's been different every time. So if you're into bondage and you want to talk more about it, please reach out to us on social media. We do respond to every message we get, as long as it's polite and respectful. Or dick pics. We'll respond to those. You might not like how we respond, but we'll respond.
And especially if you want to hear the fabulous stories of our manscaped adventures.
Mm-hmm. That said, let's go ahead and spin the wheel to see what we're talking about next week. Around and around it goes. Where could it land? No one knows.
I mean, someone knows.
Well, I don't want to dominate this conversation, but I don't want to be very quiet about it either. So I'm kind of in the middle about it, talking about this subject. It's something very true to me, something I do every day, but it's neither here nor there. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. Sometimes it's one or the other.
Switching.
We're going to talk about switching and switches. Finally, we've talked Dom.
Look at that. That was a segue. I was like talking about switching, and I was like, oh, look, I didn't even know.
Yeah. It's like you thought it up.
It is.
You were giving away spoilers.
I didn't even know it. I know. I didn't even know.
So, yeah, I'm actually really excited to talk about this because I'm a switch. We've talked subs and we've talked doms, but we've never really talked about like switches and being a switch and what all that entails. Because a lot of people are like, no, you're just not into it. I'm like, oh, yes, I am. We just don't know which way yet. So, I'm excited. I'm so excited. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Mm-hmm. I am. Look how happy I am. So, thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. We are, in fact, Dinks with Kinks. Rate us on that social media. I mean, rate us on your podcast app. Give us, the 5 stars. Tell your friends. Help us spread. We don't have a Patreon. The only way we can grow is if you guys, share us. That's how we get out there. You got to tell your friends. Be like, listen to these idiots talk about sexy stuff. In a kind of sexy, but also very unsexy way. Rate it 5 stars on that, Apple Podcast. You know how we do. I'm your host, John Dondero, and with me, as always, the very beautiful, the very illustrious Mr. Shep.
Oh, see, I had the pose ready and everything. Till next time.
And a woman who is continuously tied up in my mind, Miss Rebecca.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.